Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this May 3rd, 2015 edition of Nightcast. In our opening story tonight, we have news how the United States is sending aid planes to arrive in Kathmandu. We'll have video coming up shortly that'll show the devastation in Nepal's worst-hit district near the earthquake epicenter based on a drone video. In this opening photograph, friends, the caption reads, 2 helicopters and 4 Ospreys have been sent by the United States to Nepal. Troops and emergency aircraft have arrived in Nepal to help deliver aid to remote areas hit by last week's devastating earthquake. Relief efforts near the epicenter have been hampered by a lack of aircraft. About 100 U.S. Marines, 2 helicopters, as you see here, and 4 Ospreys capable of vertical takeoff are now in Kathmandu. Their arrival comes as Nepal's only international airport has banned larger aircraft carrying aid from landing because of concerns over the runway. More than 7,000 people died in the magnitude 7.8 earthquake. More than 14,000 people were injured. The epicenter was in the Gorkha region, and many roads to the hilly district are impassable due to landslides. The 6 aircraft are due to begin aid flights tomorrow, and the caption with this next photograph that's part of this story, we'll have that drone video in just a moment, reads, the airport has been the hub for international aid efforts for Nepal. Brigadier General Paul Kennedy said, we've got search and rescue teams waiting to go out to the remote areas. We've got relief supplies, especially shelters. New restrictions on planes landing at Kathmandu Airport will not affect aid flights, a Nepal government spokesman said. Heavier than 196 tons had been allowed to land, but restrictions have been imposed because of potholes on the runway, according to officials. Also today, the United Nations said the problem of customs controls holding up aid deliveries from the airport was diminishing. The government has taken note of some of the concerns that we've expressed to them, and they've addressed those, said Jamie McGoldrick, who is coordinating the UN relief effort in Kathmandu. And then, friends, here now is some video footage we have showing from a drone the devastation in Nepal's main district near the earthquake epicenter. Victims from this district were airlifted to Kathmandu earlier today. And I'll have some more photographs for you in just a moment. Let's take a look at this drone flight showing the devastation near the epicenter. Come on out of that and go to our next photograph that's part of this story, friends. The caption on this next photograph reads, the cleanup continued in one of Kathmandu's historic squares. Landslides and poor weather have hampered efforts to deliver aid to isolated areas. The death toll could go up as search and rescue efforts continuing in several hill districts, including Dading, Rasuwa, And another area, the government has said, while the vast majority of casualties were in Nepal, about 100 people are reported to have died in neighboring India, China, and Bangladesh. Earlier today, Nepali police released a list of foreigners who had been killed or injured. The largest group of nationals affected are the Indians, with 39 known to have died and 10 injured. The EU envoy to Nepal said on Friday that the whereabouts of 1,000 EU citizens was still unknown. And friends, in England, today they're having Remembrance Sunday. The nation falls silent as the Queen leads the commemorations.
Remembrance Sunday, a day for solemn tribute and the tightest security. When Whitehall has to be enclosed by all the paraphernalia of intense protection to enable the Queen and her ministers to stand without undue risk on a public street. According to Britain's most senior serving soldier, the current threat is real.
The proximity of the sense of threat for this weekend, which has intensified the nature of the security that's attendant on it, yeah, all that has sort of contributed to quite a different feel about this year.
At the cenotaph, there were crowds on a scale rarely seen in recent years for a remembrance ceremony of more than usual significance. It was marking a century of sacrifice, from the start of the First World War in 1914 to the end of the combat mission in Afghanistan in 2014. Politicians took their places alongside the Queen and the principal members of the royal family for the start of the national 2-minute silence. In Whitehall, the Queen placed her wreath in tribute to all those from Britain and the Commonwealth who lost their lives in the world wars and more recent conflicts. For the first time, a wreath was laid at the cenotaph on behalf of the Republic of Ireland, a wreath of laurel leaves in tribute to the 50,000 Irishmen who died fighting for Britain in the First World War. Then it was the turn of the veterans, and at the head of the march, a small group from the Normandy Veterans Association, 70 years after D-Day, on their very last Remembrance Day parade at the cenotaph. They were applauded by the crowds, as were the other veterans, their service recognised, and the sacrifice of so many of their comrades appreciated in a country where remembrance has assumed a new significance. Nicholas Witchell at the cenotaph.
All right, friends, we're going to have Nicholas again with us, along with Anita McVeigh. As long as we're on news out of England, the UK, we will cover the story that's been very popular in today's news regarding the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, who've left St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington with their new baby daughter.
Here they are. Just listen to the cheers from the crowds. Prince William beaming, the Duchess smiling broadly as well, looking very, very well. I remember last time when she came out with Prince George, she looked rather tired. She looks incredibly well, doesn't she, for giving birth just a few hours ago.
Yeah, amazingly. I mean, what is it, I can't calculate how many hours it is since, and the baby sleeping. Absolutely.
I was just about to say the baby calm, appears to be asleep.
Yeah.
Wrapped in a shawl with a little bonnet. The couple taking time to wave to the media, to well-wishers. The little girl who is fourth in line to the throne. We wait to hear her name.
And both looking so happy, aren't they?
And very relaxed, very relaxed. They've done it all before.
Okay.
Friends, the royal couple gave the press and crowds a brief glimpse, as you can see here in this video, of their new daughter before departing for Kensington Palace. The BBC's Anita McVeigh and Nicholas Witchell again covered this story as they watched the couple leaving the hospital. Friends, we've got some other news out of Europe. The Italian Coast Guard, the immigration problem, you know what I forgot to do? See if I can correct this while we're here. Okay. I forgot to switch video shot banks, so I could get you some different shots here. A problem we're having in the United States because of the present administration having a come see, come saw type of approach to immigrants coming into the United States. And instead of shipping back millions of illegal immigrants, they're being left here, being given all kind of cards and freedoms and passes, and the president acting largely on his own without waiting for approvals and what have yous, and upholding the laws that the Congress has passed, which my understanding from a little kid, when we were taught the three branches of government in the United States, the executive branch was supposed to execute the laws that the Congress passes, not make its own laws and do its own thing. It can try to influence the Congress, but if the Congress passes laws a certain way, the executive branch is supposed to carry them out. That's the way the three-check system of the government was initially set up by our forefathers. But one of the lessons in the history of man that God the Father and Jesus Christ are allowing mankind to write is, in 6,000 years of man being granted the opportunity, the freedom to go his own way ever since Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. They're writing the lesson in history that mankind without God cannot govern himself. And as Christ told us in Matthew 24, unless he were to return, when he returns, there would be no flesh left alive on this earth. You can read that in the middle part of Matthew 24, right around verse 20. I got a lot of news stories tonight, so I'm not going to take time out for that tonight. This is Sunday. We don't do a program on Friday night or Saturday night, so we have a lot of territory we have to cover between Thursday night and Sunday night. And the Italian Coast Guard this story is going to show a situation where things could get this way in the United States unless we have a policy of checking the border. The European Union and the countries in Europe are presently having a problem, and they've got a situation which could develop here where people really, really feel a need to get out of South America and Central America into the United States. But they've got this problem over in Europe where people are really wanting to get out of the suffering situations where they are, and there are things that are really prompting it right now, to the point that people are risking their lives, even when it's been known that over 1,000 at one time died at sea. And here we have in this story tonight, the Italian Coast Guard has saved nearly 4,000 people, nearly 3,700 migrants from overcrowded boats in the Mediterranean over the weekend. They also said that they had recovered at least 10 bodies from the water. Mild weather and calmer seas have meant that more vessels have been attempting the crossing to Europe. Mike Woodridge has this report.
A lifeline is thrown to yet another boat looming out of the Mediterranean darkness. Crowded, standing room only, with migrants being smuggled to Europe.
Gracias! Gracias, Italia!
This during a 24-hour period when the number of people rescued was among the highest recorded. From various African countries, from Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East, a tide of humanity continuing to risk this journey from the Libyan coast, despite more than 1,200 drowning last month and more deaths this weekend. On an Italian vessel reaching the island of Lampedusa, 116 migrants who'd been intercepted on a raft, among them 2 pregnant women.
After my father gone, I lost my mother.
It's difficult to explain, says this man from Gambia, but migrants are alone in the world.
It's very painful. It's very painful.
We were beaten and humiliated in Libya, this man says. We were on the beach 24 hours without eating. We've been so scared of not surviving at sea. The European Union decided to boost the resources for these patrols after the tragedies of last month. But the smugglers also take advantage of calm seas and the warmer weather to move more migrants across the Mediterranean in boats that are often unsafe. Italy expects that as many as 200,000 will try to reach its shores this year. Mike Woodridge, BBC News.
And friends, there's a story out of Ukraine tonight that may help us to be able to pray a little more fervently, Thy kingdom come. 1 Ukrainian soldier and 2 civilians have been killed in the past 24 hours in fighting in eastern Ukraine. Heavy shelling, well, you see this video in one of the houses that was hit. Heavy shelling took place overnight in Donetsk, although there were no reports of deaths in that area. Residential buildings were hit, as well as a school in a neighborhood near the front line. The BBC's Tom Burridge reports from the scene.
So we've been brought to the aftermath of shelling overnight here in Donetsk, a northwesterly neighbourhood of the city. This is the main city in rebel-controlled eastern Ukraine. This building appears to have taken a couple of direct hits. The residents here say that shelling started around 10:30 and lasted into the early hours. And even in central Donetsk, where we were, we could feel the city shake at certain points. It was pretty regular and pretty loud. The rebels who have brought us and other journalists you can see around us to this area to see the aftermath claim that they were not firing back, but we think we heard and felt outgoing artillery and mortars too. But what the point of shelling these neighbourhoods in Donetsk is just not clear.
We just want to know, when is it all going to end? When are they going to stop killing us? Why are they killing us? We only want one thing, and that's peace.
We've now come to a school just around the corner which was also damaged overnight. In fact, just 2 days ago, children were here in their classrooms learning. Now, we can't say for certain which side was responsible, but when people's homes and schools are hit, it does a huge amount of psychological damage. And it turns more people here in rebel-controlled eastern Ukraine against the Ukrainian army.
Friends, in the news tonight, some rights groups are saying that Saudi Arabia used cluster bombs in Yemen and that the United States has some involvement with that. The caption under this opening photograph for this story reads, Saudi jets are leading airstrikes against Yemen's Houthi rebel group. The Saudi-led coalition carrying out airstrikes in Yemen has used U.S.-supplied cluster bombs banned by much of the world, a rights group has said. Human Rights Watch, HRW, said it had evidence that the bombs were used at least twice against Houthi rebels. There were no reports of casualties. Cluster bombs spread small bombs over a wide area and can leave unexploded munitions in the ground. They are banned under a treaty signed by 116 countries, but not Saudi Arabia. The U.S. and other countries in Saudi Arabia's military coalition are not signatories of the 2008 treaty either. The U.S. does, however, bar the sale of the weapons to countries that use them in civilian areas. HRW, the Human Rights Watch, which is based in the U.S., said one of the alleged cluster bomb strikes occurred in the Al-Amar area of Al-Safra. The group published images, it said, were taken in the area and purport to show remnants of a CBU-105 sensor-fused weapon, a cluster bomb manufactured by Textron Systems Corporation in the U.S. and supplied to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates in recent years. Unverified video footage posted on YouTube by a local resident also appeared to show a number of small objects descending over the area, suspended by parachutes, consistent with the way CBU-105 bomb works, before exploding in midair. Saudi Arabia has previously denied using cluster bombs, HRW says. Shortly after the airstrikes began, a military spokesman told the media, quote, "We are not using cluster bombs at all." Saudi-led strikes against Yemen's Houthi rebel group, which seized the capital Sana'a and caused the country's president to flee, are ongoing. The declared aim is to restore President Hadi to power. Yesterday, the Houthis called the United Nations to urge Saudi Arabia to end its air campaign. More than 1,200 people have been killed and 300,000 have fled their homes in the past weeks, according to the UN. And then, friends, some news out of Europe that affects the Assyrians, that affects Germany. German train drivers prepare for a week-long strike. Germany's Duchess plans a week-long strike to start tomorrow. Their their eighth walkout in 10 months of wage negotiations. The drivers' union, GDL, called on train drivers to stop work from 1500 local time for freight and 2 a.m. on Tuesday for passenger trains. GDL wants a 5% pay rise and the working week to be reduced to 37 hours to 37 hours from 39 hours. This strike is completely inappropriate and totally over the top, Dutch Bond said. The GDL union is going to cause massive harm to rail passengers and its employees, but also to the German economy, said the train company. And that's one reason, friends, why we are taking note of it, sharing this story with you tonight. If it has some impact on the German economy, that can affect the euro. And, and one of the things that can cause the EU to come together in a federation more quickly than not is when there are frustrating conditions in existence. And when that EU does form into what the Bible explains through the prophecies in Daniel, with the 5 toes on one foot and 5 on the other, the 10 toes from 2 feet, east and west divisions. It's going to be a time of World War III, a time that a new and final head of the Holy Roman Empire is appointed. It's going to become the time of a great martyrdom of God's saints. Let's just take a moment. I know many of you are familiar with it, but maybe there's some watching tonight who are not. Let's go over to our photographs and go in on this slide that summarizes what will happen during the Great Tribulation. the center of this slide is showing the crown of the Holy Roman Empire, which is at this moment is still on display in the Royal Treasury in Vienna, Germany. In Vienna, Austria. I've been there. I had to go through Germany. I took a train from France through Germany and into Austria to see this crown. And I was in Israel at the time, and God's end-time apostle with his television crew and my good friend Aaron Dean, who was assisting him and flying with him at the time as his steward on the plane. I was in the hotel when they arrived, and it was nice to see them. Mr. Armstrong came up and started very enthusiastically chatting with me, seeing someone from Pasadena over in Israel, and he was all excited. He had just written the personal for the Plain Truth that morning and faxed it over to Pasadena, and they faxed it back to him already with the typesetting and so on, that he could look at how the layout came out, because I think he said he just sent it in handwritten. But anyway, Aaron showed me an article in the Worldwide News that showed that didn't show a picture or anything. It just mentioned that the crown of the Holy Roman Empire would be on display in the Royal Treasury. And I told Aaron, I said, Aaron, before I go back to Pasadena, I want to go see that. So I made arrangements already. I've called and booked a flight here from Israel to France, and then reserved me a train, not flight, but a train trip from France through Germany into Austria to see this crown. And I got over there and I've told you, some of you, how I took my own picture and nearly had my camera confiscated, but because they don't allow the public to take pictures of that, they reserve that crown to be only photographed by the government. And I complained when there was a sign on the glass that said you can't use flash, and the guard said, you can't take a picture of that, period. We'll take your camera. So I kept my mouth shut and didn't tell them, hey, I already took some time-lapse pictures. I don't know if they're going to come out, but I didn't tell them. I just took off with my camera and said, well, thank you so long. I appreciate you having that crown on display here. And anyway, once that crown is taken out of that treasury and flown to Frankfurt, Germany, for the Pope to place on the head of the seventh and final head of the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire will be restored. It went into the pit again after a 9.5-year little route. Let's come out of here and I'll zoom in on after Mussolini was symbolically wearing it. Let's go in on Mussolini here as the sixth head of the Holy Roman Empire during the years of 1936 to 1945, when Mr. Herbert Armstrong was broadcasting coast to coast in the United States and observed a little mention in the newspaper that Mussolini, after invading Ethiopia, had laid claim, and after having been given a concordant from the Vatican, he invaded Ethiopia and laid claim to having restored the Holy Roman Empire. And, Mr. Armstrong noticed that and put it in context with Revelation 17, verse 10, that says, there are 7 kings, 5 of which are fallen, and 1 is. So when Mussolini made that claim to restoring the Holy Roman Empire, which he did for a short time, his reign as the 6th head was essentially equivalent to the reign of the 5th head under Napoleon. Napoleon reigned as the head of the Holy Roman Empire from 1804 to 1814, a period between those years of about 9.5 years' reign. And the Pope actually flew to Frankfurt, Germany, or traveled to Frankfurt, Germany, and was there. The Pope held the coronation ceremony, but Napoleon, in his impatience, he grabbed the crown from the Pope and put it on his own head, which the Pope was there to do, and the Pope, finalized and gave his quote-unquote blessing to Napoleon. And, of course, after the Battle of Waterloo in 1814, some accounts say 1815, but basically right there in that time period, that ended the long, continuous 1,260-year reign since 554 A.D. of the Holy Roman Empire, sent it into the abyss in 1814, until, again, Mussolini revived it as its sixth head, as Mr. Armstrong was given that information and revelation from God to understand and pass on to us before anybody else ever even mentioned the idea. And that shows us that God's servant through whom God revealed this was Mr. Armstrong. And that happened in 1936. And then Mussolini was killed in 1945. He was, after being killed, was hung upside down with his mistress and his comrades from a canopy at an Esso gas station in Italy. And that ended the sixth reign and put the Holy Roman Empire back into the a dormant status until this present time today. And we're now awaiting the seventh and final head of that Holy Roman Empire. So we watch anything related to Germany. And again, in Germany, with their rail strike, the German drivers, the GDL also wants for their train drivers, wants the right to negotiate on behalf of other employees, including train stewards. The 43-hour strike last month led to cancellation of 2/3 of Germany's long-distance trains. Both the union and the company blame one another for the breakdown in talks that led to the new round of strikes. GDL said no results have been achieved in the negotiations in a statement on its website. Deutsche Bahn employs 300,000 people, including 196,000 in Germany, and transports about 5.5 million people in Germany every day. And then, friends, I've got one last story I could show you. Since it's Sunday night, we often go a little bit longer. Since we mentioned Germany, and Germany was the culprit behind World War I and behind World War II. And as Mr. Armstrong has explained it, and I mentioned Mr. Armstrong's name, even though he's in the grave since 1986, he was God's apostle for these latter days, for these end times. And his publications, thankfully, are still alive, even though the organization which he started and handed over to others in trust that they would continue the truths that God taught through him. Of trust they've tremendously violated. And that organization, the head of that organization, is now trying to claim copyrights infringement against those who want to show Mr. Armstrong's World Tomorrow radio and television broadcast. Thankfully, a lot of people privately have those, and if you really want to hear those broadcasts still, you can get them. So far, they've only tried to clamp down on them through those that are posted on YouTube, because YouTube has a content ID facility in operation that makes it easy for people that have any claim at all to copyright to exercise a copyright claim. Now, if a person does so wrongly, they can wind up sued, and the damages can be way up there. So we'll talk more about that as time goes on, because I'm involved on that a little bit myself. But it being Remembrance Day today in England, and as part of BBC Wales Today series about the, oh, you know what? I think I better check, make sure we've got a license to be able to play this one. So I'm going to hold this one off today. But there was an interesting story in today's news about how the land girls helped during World War II. During World War I. And England should have a pretty good memory of things that happened to them that happened to them at the hands of Germany twice, World War I, World War II, and round 3 is on the way, as Mr. Armstrong has explained. Friends, I got one photograph that appeared in today's news. I'm going to close with it. Let me see if you can see this okay. On this Texas government man's desk is a little a cube, the words of which, it's on the right side, the one I'm referring to here, that he puts it there for some good humor that it is. And I thought, hey, this would be interesting with sharing with you for closing tonight. His little sign, maybe you can't read it, I'll read it to you. It says, "Don't steal." You know, that is one of God's commandments, you know, to not steal. Don't steal. But his comment underneath that, "Don't steal," says, "The government hates competition." It for this Sunday night report here on Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Monday evening, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.